Okay. Jacob and Rachel. Now Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the east, to Laban. So he looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, there were three flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a large stone was on the well's mouth. Now all the flocks would be gathered, and they would roll the stone from the well's mouth, water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place on the well's mouth. So Jacob said to them, My brethren, where are you from? And they said, We are from Haran. Then he said to them, Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. So he said to them, Is he well? They said, He is well. Look, his daughter Rachel is coming with the sheep. Then he said, It is still high day. It is not time for the cattle to be gathered. Water the sheep and go and feed them. But they said, We cannot, until all the shepherds are gathered together. And they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth. Then we will water the sheep. Now, while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. So Jacob told Rachel he was her father's relative and Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father those words. And then came to pass, when Laban heard the report about Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. So he told Laban all these things. Now Laban said to him, Surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stayed with him for a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, Because you are my brother, should you therefore serve me nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? Now Laban had two daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were delicate, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. So Laban said, It is better that I give her to you than to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled. I may go into her. Now Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a wedding feast. Thus it came to pass in the evening. He took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. So Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a handmaiden. And then it came to pass in the morning, behold, it was Leah, and he said to Laban, What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me? Laban replied, It must not be done so in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn, fulfill her week, and I will give you this one also for the service you will render me still another 7 years. Then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week. So gave him his daughter Rachel and wife also. So he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife also. Laban also gave his handmaiden Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as a handmaiden. Then Jacob also went into Rachel, and he told Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban still another 7 years. Jacob's children. But when the Lord Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore Jacob a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has surely looked on my humiliation. Now, therefore, my husband will love me." Then she conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. He said, "Because the Lord heard I was hated, he has therefore given me this son also." So she called his name Simeon. She conceived again and bore a son and said, "Now this time my husband will be on my side because I have borne him 3 sons." Therefore she called his name Levi. Now she conceived again and bore a son and said, "Now I will give thanks to the Lord." Therefore she called his name Judah. Then she stopped bearing. Now, when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, "Give me children, or else I die." So Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from your fruit of the womb?" She replied to Jacob, "Here is my maid, Bilhah. Go into her, and she will bear on my knees, that I also may have children by her." She then gave him Bilhah, her maid, as wife, and Jacob went into her. Thus Bilhah, Rachel's handmaiden, conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has judged me, and he has heard my voice and given me a son." Therefore she called his name Dan. Now Rachel's handmaiden, Bilhah, conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "God has helped me, and I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed." So he called his name Naphtali. Now, when Leah saw she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah, her handmaiden, and gave her Jacob as wife. So Jacob went into her, and Zilpah, Leah's handmaiden, conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "Good fortune." Thus she called his name Gad. Now Zilpah, Leah's handmaiden, bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "I am blessed, for the woman will call me blessed." So she called his name Asher. Now Reuben went into the days of wheat and harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Thus Rachel said to Leah, "Give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Is it still a matter what you have taken away, my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?" So Rachel said, "Not so. Let him lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes." Now Jacob came out of the field in the evening. Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come into me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he lay with her that night. This guy listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said, "God has given me my wages, because I have given my handmaiden to my husband." So she called his name Issachar. Now Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. Then Leah said, "God has endowed me with a good endowment. Now my husband will choose me, because I have borne him 6 sons." So she called his name Zebulun. And afterwards she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. Some footnotes from the previous page. 28:17. The house of God speaks of the church, and the gate of heaven is the mother of God. Carrion and Akathist services. Because the son was conceived in her womb, she opened the gate of heaven to those who embrace the faith of Abraham. 28:18. The stone is Christ, the foundation stone of the church. Matthew 21:42 through 44, Mark 12:10, Luke 20:17, 18, Acts 4:11, Romans 9:32, 33, 1 Corinthians 3:10 and 11, 1 Philistines 2:4 through 8. The oil signifies Christ, whose human nature was anointed by the Holy Spirit. Matthew 1:18, 3:16, Hebrews 1:9. 28:22. God's house speaks of the church. Jacob gave a tithe of all God gave him. A tithe is 10% given to the church. 29:14. Laban called Jacob my bone and my flesh, for they were blood relatives. In contrast to this, the church is not based on blood relationships. It is based on the life-giving flesh of Christ, by which those who embrace him in faith become members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bones. Ephesians 5:30. The members of his body are closer in the relationship than blood relations. 29:15. Laban called 29:15. Laban called Jacob my brother. Technically, Jacob was Laban's nephew. Therefore, the title brother does not necessarily mean a son of the same father and mother. In Matthew 13:55 and Mark 3:31, Jesus is said to have brothers. Those are not sons of Mary, his mother. They are simply close relatives. The son of the church calls Mary ever virgin. This belief is a dogma of the church, and she bore only one son, the Lord Jesus Christ. 29:27. 1 week in case equals 7 years. Thus, each week in Daniel's prophecy equals 7 years. Daniel 9. Coming to the coming Christ in the incarnation. 29:34, 30, and 35. Levi was the forefather of the Levitical priesthood, thus known as the order of Aaron. For Aaron came from Levi, Hebrews 7:11. but the Christ could not part of this order because he would descend from Judah, Hebrews 7:14. However, the prophecy said Christ would be the high priest of the order of Melchizedek, Psalms 109:4. Thus, both orders cannot coexist as the way to be perfected. The order of Aaron became obsolete because Levi and his offspring are still dead, whereas Christ is alive from the dead. Therefore, Jews are not made children of God through the order of Aaron. Both Jews and Gentiles become the children of God through the order of Melchizedek. In the body of Christ, the church, which is also called the Israel of God, Galatians 6:16. The names 36. The names of the sons of Jacob reveal things concerning the incarnation of the Son of God. For example, Rachel speaks of Dan's birth in relation to God as judge. Christ shall come to judge the living and the dead in the creed. Also, Reuben's birth relates to humiliation. 29:32. The Son humbled himself to become man for man's salvation. Philippians 2:7. Simeon's birth emphasizes hatred. 29:33. Christ was hated without cause. John 15:25. And sometimes so is the church. John 15:18. Levi's birth speaks of union. For on my side speaks of union. 29:34. Christ unites his church to himself in baptism. Romans 6:5. Judah's birth relatives to Thanksgiving. 29:35. Christ established the Eucharist, which means thanksgiving. 37. Naphtali's birth emphasizes victory. Christ prevailed over death by triumphing over it through the cross. Colossians 2:4, 14, 15. The agreement of Jacob and Laban. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. Thus she conceived and bore a son. And God said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add another son to me. Now it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Jacob said to Laban, send me away. I that I may go to my own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children for whom I served you, and let me go. For you know the service I rendered you. Then Laban said to him, if I could find grace in your eyes, I would seek for it divinely. For God has blessed me by your coming. So he said, name me your wages and I will give it. Jacob replied, you know how I have served you and how numerous your cattle became with me. For what you had done before I came was little, for it had increased to a great amount, and the Lord had blessed you since my coming. Now, therefore, when shall I establish my own house? Thus Laban said to him, what shall I give you? Jacob replied, you shall not give me anything. If you will do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep your sheep. Let me pass through all your flocks today, removing from them all the gray sheep and all the spotted and speckled among the goats. And these shall be my wages. So my righteousness will answer for me in time to come, when the subject of my wages comes before you. Everyone that is speckled and spotted among the goats and gray among the sheep will be considered stolen if it is with me. Then Laban said to him, let it be according to your word. So he removed that day all the male goats that were speckled and spotted, all the female goats that were speckled and spotted, everyone that had some white in it, and all the gray ones among the sheep, and gave them into the hands of his sons. Then he put 3 days' journey between himself and Jacob, and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. Now Jacob took himself rods of green poplar and of the almond and chestnut trees, peeled white strips in them, tearing off the bark, so the white strips he had peeled appeared on the rods as spotted. Let's see. Then he placed the rods he had peeled in the gutters of the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink. So they should conceive at the rods as they came to drink. So the flocks conceived before the rods, and the flocks brought forth speckled, spotted, and ash-colored speckled. But Jacob separated the male lambs and placed a speckled ram before the sheep, and all that were spotted among the male lambs. Then he separated himself from the flocks by themselves. It did not mix them with the sheep of Laban. Hold on a minute. Let me check something. Thus it came to pass, whenever the sheep conceived, that Jacob placed the rods before the sheep in the gutters, so they might conceive according to the rods. But whenever the sheep had already given birth, he did not put them in. Thus it came to pass that the unmarked were Laban's and the marked were Jacob's. So the man became exceedingly rich and had many cattle and oxen, male and female servants, and camels and donkeys. Jacob flees from Laban. Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and from our father's property he acquired all this wealth. So Jacob saw Laban's countenance, and indeed it was not favorable toward him as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to your father's land and to your family, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field where the flocks were, and said to them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not favorable toward me as before. But the God of my father has been with me. Now you know that with all my might I served your father. Yet your father deceived me, and I changed my wages 10 times with respect to the male lambs. But God did not allow him to harm me. If he said thus, the speckled shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore speckled. But if he said thus, the white shall be your wages, then all the sheep bore white. So God has taken away all your father's cattle and given them to me. Now it came to pass, when the flocks conceived, I lifted my eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the male goats and the rams that were speckled, spotted, and ash colored, speckled, were mating with the sheep and the goats. Then the angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob. Thus I said, Here I am. So he said, Lift your eyes now and see all the male goats and the rams mating with the sheep, and the goats are speckled, spotted, and ash colored speckled. For I have seen everything Laban is doing for you, or Laban is doing to you. I am God who appeared to you at Bethel, where you anointed the pillar and made a vow to me. Now then, arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your nativity, and I will be with you. Then Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, Is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we considered strangers by him? As he sold us and also completely consumed our money. For all the riches and glory God has taken from our father, God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it. Then Jacob rose and set his sons and his wives on camels, and he carried away all his livestock and all his possessions acquired in Mesopotamia, everything belonging to him, to go to his father Isaac in Canaan. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen her father's idols. But Jacob had hidden from Laban the Syrian his intention of running away. So he fled with all that he had and crossed the river and headed for the mountains of Gilead. Laban pursues Jacob. Then Laban was told on the third day that Jacob had fled. So he took all his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey and overtook him in the mountains of Gilead. But God had come to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said to him, Be careful that you do not speak evil things to Jacob at any time. So Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountains, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountains of Gilead. Then Laban said to Jacob, What have you done? That you have stolen away unknown to me, and robbed me, and carried away my daughters like captives taken with the sword. Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs, with timbrel and harp. And you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have done foolishly in so doing. It is in my power to do you harm. But the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, Be careful that you do not speak evil things to Jacob at any time. Now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods? Then Jacob answered and said to Laban, Because I was afraid. For I said, Perhaps you would take your daughters and all my possessions from me by force, with whomever you find your gods. Let him not live in the presence of our brethren. Identify what I have yours and take it with you. For Jacob did not know Rachel had stolen them. Thus Laban went in and searched Leah's tent, but found nothing. Then he searched Jacob's and those of the handmaidens, but found nothing. Then he entered Rachel's tent, Now Rachel had taken the idols, put them in the camel's saddle, and sat on them. Then he said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me. So he searched the entire tent, but did not find the idols. Then Jacob was angry and rebuked Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my injustice? What is my sin? That you have so hotly pursued me. Although you searched all my things, what part of your household goods have you found? Set them here before my brethren and your brethren, so they may judge between us. These 20 years I have been with you. Your sheep and your female goats have not miscarried their young, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was caught by wild animals I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of any stolen day or by night. There I was. In the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times with respect to the female lambs, unless the God of my father Abraham and the fear of Isaac had been with me. Surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed, but God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. Previous page footnotes. 30:11. Gad's name speaks of good fortune or prosperity. Christ's incarnation is man's true prosperity and health. 3 John 2:3. 30:13. Asher relates to blessing. Christ's incarnation blesses his own with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places. Ephesians 1:3. 30:18. Issachar's name speaks of wages or reward. Christ will bring his reward to give each one according to his works. Revelations 22:12. 30:20. Zebulun's name emphasizes endowment. Zebulun is a haven for ships. 49:13. Christ is our endowment as a haven from the stormy sea of life. 30:23-24. Joseph's name relates to the bearing of reproach, and he bore the reproach of his brothers when they sold him into Egypt. Christ bore our reproach. Romans 15:3. 30:33. Jacob was made righteous by faith, as were his father Isaac and grandfather Abraham. This righteousness is a gift of God's grace, one of the 4 general virtues of wisdom. See notes on Proverbs 12b-5. Jacob lived out this righteousness in his behavior toward his uncle Laban. 31:3. The Lord is the Word and the Son of God. He told Jacob to return to the land of his father. For this land was a type of the world to come. Laban's country was not Jacob's permanent residence. Hebrews 11:14-16 and 21. 31:11. The Word is also called the angel of God, because it is he alone who reveals the Father. And also because when the Son is beheld, so is the Father, for he is the Father's radiance. Therefore, the Father and the Son are one. 31:13. In verse 11, the name God refers to the Father, but in this verse, the angel is called the God who appeared. Thus, the Son is true God of true God in the Nicene Creed. 31:3-16. The passage is read during Tuesday Vespers in the 6th week of Great Lent. And I'll stop there and pick up next time.